Climate change is the biggest threat that's facing the park in the long term. It's going to change how we relate to the park in a lot of different ways. We're warming at a rate faster than the global average here in the Adirondacks. The surface of our lakes are warming significantly as well, particularly in the later summer and fall months. So we're seeing these changes happen, right here, right now in the Adirondacks, and data from projects like this are just helping us to further understand what's going on and what the future might look like. So this year we were awarded a 5-year contract from NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, to continue what's called the Adirondack Long-Term Monitoring program. And that's 58 lakes across the Adirondack Park that have historically been monitored to look at recovery from acid rain. And we're continuing that portion of the work, but we're layering on top of that work to understand how these lakes are being influenced by climate change. We're out on Upper Saranac Lake conducting our routine long-term monitoring of the lake. So we're collecting water samples from the surface of the lake and the bottom, as well as profiles of the temperature and oxygen and other parameters, and also checking on this environmental monitoring platform that we have out on the lake. Upper Saranac Lake we've been monitoring for about 30 years. Historically, that was related to algae blooms that were occurring on the lake, and we still have sort of interest in that component of things that are occurring on the lake, but we've been transitioning that program to understand climate change more and more. And so when we take these profiles of the water column to look at the temperature and the oxygen, those are things that are changing with climate change. Our lakes are getting warmer at the surface. They're staying stratified for a longer period of time, which means this layering of the lake from warm on top and cold on bottom is staying that way for longer. And that means the oxygen at the bottom is declining. And all of those things affect the health of our lakes here in the Adirondacks. Water is most dense at 4 degrees Celsius. So in the spring, when the ice goes out, the lake is warming from roughly 0 at the surface when it's in contact with the ice, sort of warms up to 4 degrees, and as it's doing that, it's getting more dense. As the water gets colder, it sort of settles through the water column to the bottom of the lake, and that causes the lake to turn over or mix, which is a really important process for the health of a lake because it brings oxygen and nutrients down to the depths of the lake. A few of the things that are probably most notable and relevant to people is the habitat for lake trout. So this lake here has lake trout in it, which is our native cold water salmonid in New York State. And with climate change, between the warming of the water and the less oxygen, that's reducing habitat available for lake trout. And so that's a key thing for us on this lake, is understanding how much of that habitat is available for those fish and how it's changing over time. And so the lake trout in the lake they're looking for this Goldilocks zone this time of year where it's too warm at the surface for them, so they want to be down deep. But as we get farther and farther down, we do start to see the oxygen decline. And so they also need plenty of oxygen. So they're looking for this particular zone in the water column that is both cool enough and has enough oxygen. With climate change, that area is getting smaller and smaller in a lot of our lakes. We do a couple of things when we sample. This is a piece of equipment called a sonde. And on the end of this, there's a bunch of sensors that allow us to measure different aspects of the water column in real time. So we can measure things like the temperature, the amount of dissolved oxygen, the pH, the amount of chlorophyll, which is a photosynthetic pigment in the algae or phytoplankton that are in the lake. We can measure phycocyanin, which is another pigment that's specifically found in cyanobacteria, which are responsible for harmful algal blooms. Here in the Adirondacks, so much of our identity is tied to the environment, and even our economy is largely tourism-based and dependent on people being able to get out and enjoy beautiful lakes like this, be able to fish on them, recreate on them, be able to utilize them for drinking water and all of these different things. With climate change, that has the potential to change how we relate to our lakes. If we have harmful algal blooms, you can't swim in lakes when blooms are occurring. If we're reducing the amount of habitat for cold water fish like lake trout, that can affect the fishing, the sport fishing on these lakes, and all of that can potentially affect our economy and our communities.